Hey, it's Nathan Crampy, and this video here is to talk about how you can be tricked into paying higher taxes in retirement. So let's dive in to the details, the ways forward, and how you can avoid those tricks. Most of us have been conditioned that as we are going from our working career into retirement to really have that thought process that we will be paying less taxes in retirement. But you know what? That is not necessarily the case. And for you, that may actually be different. It may actually be the fact that there's going to be more taxes that you owe in retirement. Now, let's take a step back. Let's figure out why that is. Well, first and foremost, when you take a look at your taxes before your retirement, so this is while you're working, so this is part of any W-2 that you're going to be earning, or even with your business taking money out of the business itself as part of distributions. It all comes back to the taxes that you're paying right now and how you're actually setting yourself up to avoid some of those taxes. So the deductions you're able to take, the ways that you're contributing to your retirement accounts, like all of those are ways that you can actually be putting money away pre-tax. Well, the nice thing about that is that it actually lowers your taxes. So putting money aside in retirement plans is a great avenue, is a great place to say this money is for the future and providing the confidence in your future. Yes, absolutely. But what really comes back to it then is that we're making trade-offs. So it very well could be that we're trading off taxes today to pay more taxes later. And the thought process was that we were going to be paying taxes in a lower bracket. But as we're taking a look at things, that may not necessarily be the case. Well, why do I say that? Well, first off, if it is true that we're putting money aside from our paychecks into retirement plans, well then that means that we're paying less today and we're going to be paying more in the future just because we don't have those deductions. But also, let's think about what tax brackets have done over the last 10 to 20 years. They have basically started coming down more and more. And we have had some huge tax cuts that have happened over the last number of years that are going to be set to change automatically here in the future. Now, because of those tax cuts, that is an opportunity to say, how can I plan for those changes that are going to come, and especially with higher tax brackets. So even if nothing changes, even if today you are in a lower tax bracket than what you had been in when you were working, chances are that's going to change because of the fact that tax brackets are going to change, the amount of money you're spending on taxes are going to change, and then what happens is that we're paying more in taxes than what you anticipated, and the more taxes we owe and pay, the less we have available for you, for your retirement, for your family, and those that you care about, especially your community. So that is the reason why we need to be talking about this kind of aspect of taxes and making sure that we can be trying to make that transition happen, that we don't pay taxes when we don't have to. Well, if you are still working, well then it's pretty simple that we can make some changes of how we're saving the money. So instead of saving it all into your retirement plan pre-tax, so let's say a traditional 401k or your defined contribution plans, your defined benefit plans like your pensions, all that's your pre-tax. Well, we don't have to put all of the money in to that specific area without looking at other areas. Because remember, we have two different buckets that we can be putting money into. The categories that are what I call tax me now. That is where we can put money aside into a non-retirement account, and what ends up happening then is that that money can grow. Well, yes, we pay tax on some of the dividends, the interest, and the capital gains on a yearly basis, but let's say we don't have those capital gains. Well, the money can keep growing, and if we don't have those capital gains that's happening on a yearly basis, we don't owe tax. So we can have differences of taxes there. And then we have the other category, that third bucket, what I like to call tax me never. That's the Roth accounts. That's the life insurances. That category of things is saying once the money's in those tax shelters, well, it's never going to be taxed again if we take money out of there in the correct ways. So there's different ways that while you're still working, we can actually be putting money aside in those different buckets, and that alone is going to help lower your taxes in the future. Well, what if you already are retired? See, having those different categories is great, but let's say we've been plowing all of our money into this one category of your retirement accounts, this one bucket. Well, what can we do then to say, I need to be spreading my money out to the other buckets? I need to be really trying to make sure that I can be taking money from these buckets in the future when my tax brackets are higher, when the expectations for my taxes are higher. Because then if we can pluck some money out of these different avenues, these different buckets, that is how we lower your taxes. That is how we can say you're not going to be tricked into paying higher taxes. Well, let's take a step back and take a look at ways that we can be doing this. Okay, one of the best ways to work with this is the Roth conversions. Now, it's no secret that this is one of the best ways to take money out of your retirement accounts, pay some tax on it today, to put it away in that bucket that will grow tax-free. Well, the trick between here is to figure out how much money that we should be putting into those buckets and where we can keep your tax brackets today. Because if we're going to be paying tax, we don't want to pay too much in tax. And with a graduated bracket that we have there, whether it's the 12%, the 22, 24, all the way up to the mid-30s for the percent of money that would be set aside on a federal level for you in taxes, we want to come back and say, let's try to keep that as low as possible. And maybe we can keep you in the 24% tax bracket without making the higher jumps. Well, if that's the case, then we need to know where you're at within those brackets. Once we do that, once we know where you're at in those brackets, then we can be shifting more money into those Roth accounts. So by paying a little tax today, that's going to save us from paying more tax in the future, especially if the tax brackets increase. Alright, so we talked about the Roth conversion, yes, but what can we do also to help with your taxes? That comes back down to the fact that we can be taking money from those different buckets even today. So even while we have lower tax brackets, maybe it's going to be the best opportunity for you to take some money from your retirement accounts, some money from your cash accounts, your non-retirement accounts, that bucket that would be taxable on a yearly basis, and then we can also take money from some of the other avenues of those tax-free sources that you already have. So that may include Roth accounts that you already have. That may include taking money out of life insurances on a loan level, on a loan basis that we may want to repay later, or we may not. So there's a lot of tools with life insurance that you need to look into as part of your policies, and maybe, just maybe, it may be a great opportunity for you to take some money out today to be used and utilized in retirement. Now, there's other avenues and tools that we can go down here as well, and there are reverse mortgages. There's a lot of things that in this category that could be used, but just spreading out those income sources is helpful so that you can pay less in tax. And that is the goal, that we don't pay as much in tax. That we can be saying, how can I keep my taxes as low as possible. And sometimes you may not even pay tax at all. That is also one of the desires and the goals with the confidence that you can have in your wealth plan, and making sure that as part of all of the details that you're looking at, that if we can say the wealth transfer is taken care of, the wealth enhancement side of things are taken care of, your investments are taken care of, well, if those things are taken care of and we can pay lower taxes, that would be a great opportunity for you. Also, a part of this video, and for you watching it, I am going to give you something special. A webinar called Retire Happy, where we're going to be celebrating the key areas of your retirement and how to have confidence going into retirement and the things you want to do. Now, we're going to be talking about the 7 steps for retirement confidence. I'm also going to be asking you 2 key questions that you need to address and answer to have that confidence in your retirement. And then the last aspect, we'll be diving into the number 1 risk of your retirement and how to solve that. So those areas are what we'll be talking about in this webinar. Now, go ahead, sign up in the description below for this webinar, and I look forward to helping you have the confidence and create an impact with your business, your family, and your community with your wealth. I look forward to seeing you there. Okay, I did mention it when we talked about life insurance, that there's some ways and some uses that life insurance can come up to be tax-free. Well, that's really comes back down to the types of policies. So with everything that we're talking about here, it may make sense for you. It really may, or it may not. And when we talk about life insurance, first of all, when we take a look at this, you have to have an insurable need. So this is something that there are people out there that want to just sell you life insurance just to sell you life insurance, so that they get a commission, so that they can be making money off of you. Well, that's not the reason to get into a life insurance policy, especially if you are the one that's going to be paying for it. So when we take a look at life insurance, yes, we want to make sure that it's going to be beneficial for you. It's going to be beneficial for your family, that it's going to be helping the ones you care about. And if it helps them with the tax consequences that are owed off of all this, then that is why we have the life insurance. Now, with that in place, with talking about the life insurance in that way, that we want to make sure that we have the insurable need, then we can come back and say, what other avenues and tools can we be utilizing as part of that life insurance to help you with your retirement? And like I've talked about before, there are tools and aspects of certain types of life insurances that may actually be beneficial to you to help lower your taxes. So this would be a permanent policy, not a term policy, not a group policy through your employer or with your company. But this would be one that you'd be able to take some money out of on an ongoing basis and can be deemed as loans. Well, when that's the case, the bad part is that they do want their money back at some point, and you're basically taking a loan from yourself. But on the flip side, there are other aspects and avenues why this may be a great tool for you. So don't overlook the value of life insurance can play in your retirement, especially with that tax-free income that it could provide. But like I said before, the caveat is that it's not free. This is your money that you've set aside, and if done incorrectly, could significantly hurt your life insurance and what it's actually there to protect. So there are some big areas that you want to do some planning over. Well, we are kind of talking a lot about this tax-free aspect. Let's take a look at one other aspect that you have, and that can come back to annuities. Now, annuities on design are just to make sure that they can guard against you living. So it's insurance against you living, against your longevity. Now, with annuities, you can do a couple different things. You can take withdrawals off of them, and that money can go through the entire rest of your life. and possibly even a spouse's life. But you can also annuitize. And that's where you give all the money to the insurance company, and the insurance company says, great, we're going to send you a check every single month. If you live 2 months, we get to keep all the money. But if you live 20 years, we're going to be paying out all that money to you. And if we only put enough money in for 10 years, well then the insurance company is going to pay you for another 10 years above and beyond that. Well, that's what annuities can be designed for. And again, they can be great tools. The caveat is that they have sometimes higher fees, and there's a lot of different things and reasons that it's going to be kind of trying to make sure that it's going to be a good fit for you. But when you annuitize something, again, there's some hardships, there's some pain that can be coming from that you may not want. But the other aspect, that nice aspect, is that it can actually remove some of those required minimum distributions with your money, because we're giving up control over that money, so we don't have to claim it on an ongoing basis because there is no more value to that money. So we're having an income stream. Yes, that income stream may be taxable depending on the money that we've put into there, especially if it comes from your IRA accounts, your retirement accounts. But the however is that now when we take money out of there on the ongoing basis, that's only the portion that we are having for that month or for that year. And we don't have to worry about if there was going to be more required minimum distributions off of that money. Now, why that's important is because that has the ability to lower your overall taxes. So when we're talking about taxes, when we're talking about not being tricked into paying more taxes, well, that's one element that you could be using as part of your arsenal. Again, it's not the only element, it's not the only tool that you have in your toolbox to lower your taxes, but it's at least one that you may want to consider. Especially talking about annuities now, we also want to talk about other aspects of them. And if annuitizing your annuity is not the way forward for you and for what you want as part of your wealth plan and the confidence you can have in the financial future, well, let's talk about the qualified longevity annuities. So the qualified longevity annuity contracts, and these are specific ones that do almost the identical things that life insurance does, that annuities do, with being able to provide and pay for some of that money to you, but we can do that without the required minimum distributions. So this is another way that we can take money and mold it and utilize the changes of the tax laws correctly so that we can remove the required minimum distributions and we can pay more in the future as part of income for you. All of that can be very helpful of how to minimize taxes. So there's actually specific contracts designed to do just that. Now, because you have made it this far, I want to celebrate you with this extra special bonus clip on the Secure Act and how it relates to your taxes. The Secure Act has changed a lot when it comes to retirement. Now, there's two aspects that I think you will be appreciative of knowing. The first one is that required minimum distributions have changed. So no longer do you have to take required minimum distributions, or your RMDs, when you turn 70 and a half. That has been eliminated. Now, it's been eliminated for certain individuals though. You see, if you have already been taking your RMDs and you had turned 70 and a half, you were taking them already, you still need to take them. The however is that if you have yet to turn 72 now, and you're in that point in time where you had not turned 70 and a half when the Secure Act was enacted, well, then you have until the age of 72 in order to start claiming your required minimum distributions. So why is this important? Well, because when we talk about taxes, when we talk about how that affects you and your wealth, delaying taking out of the accounts allows for more planning. You see, if we don't have minimums that we're required by law to take out of your accounts, well, then we can do other things. like more Roth conversions or planning for the different buckets that are going to be your streams of income. So that's going to be vitally important. So use this window, this period of time, which is brand new, to your benefit. Yes, we don't need to take money out of the accounts unless we want to or have to, and that's a really big piece of it. Now, the other aspect actually comes back down to your heirs. You see, the Secure Act made a lot of changes with what we call the stretch IRA. Now, in retirement, you have to take money out of the accounts. By law, you're required minimum distributions. When you pass away and then you transition those accounts to the ones you love, say your children, well, they in turn have to take out a required minimum distribution from their account as well. So when you hand them that required minimum distribution, that IRA, from the IRA account, well, you have a couple different ways that you were handing it to them. One was the fact that they could just take all the money right away out of the accounts, which would not be very advantageous. But the second way that they had the ability to do would actually be to take money out on an ongoing basis, a very small amount, in the exact same way that you would have to do that, but it would be stretched over their lifetime. Well, the Secure Act changed that. You see, if we take a little bit every single year, we can make your retirement accounts last through 1 or 2 additional generations. Well, that's not going to be the case anymore. Now we have a finite 10-year window that we have the ability to take money out of the accounts. So what that looks like then is that no matter what, if we pass money on to the children, that starts their 10-year window. And what that could be is saying that if you have a large account that we're passing on to the kids, they now in turn may be just saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxes that they had not anticipated. And if they are still single, well, that may put them into a lot higher tax bracket. If they are married and both them and their spouse are working, well, that again could be putting them into a tax bracket that was not intended by them, and which may be higher than what you're paying as well. So there is a lot to be said about this provision changing. So right now we only have the ability to have a 10-year window of time to take money out of the accounts when you pass the money to your children. Now, this does not apply to your spouse. That is completely separate. So make sure you understand that those are going to be separate ways that works. But when we pass the money to the children, we can still be planning for that. And one plan that you should be taking a look at is maybe if your spouse is still alive, to pass on some, not all of the money to them. You see, what happens is that they have the spousal, basically they can continue the policy, your IRA account, as a spousal IRA. So that will look like now that it really just becomes their account and they can take it out of their life expectancy. So then all of a sudden they are paying required minimum distributions on their life. Well, there's no tax when you transition the money to them. It's only as they continue to take money out of the account. However, if they pass on all of that money to the children, again, that starts their 10-year window. But that's on that money. What happens if maybe your spouse doesn't need all of the money? That you have enough saved up that a portion can go to your spouse, and that your spouse will be taken care of, no questions. That we have money set aside so that they have the confidence that no matter what, they're going to be taken care of. Well, that extra money, why don't we pass that on to the kids at this time? So at your passing, we can pass on some of the money to the kids, and we can pass some of the money on to your spouse. Now, what that will do is that's going to set up 2 separate windows, because the money you pass on to the children, they will have to take out with that required minimum distribution over 10 years. But if your spouse, say, is living for an additional 10 years, well, then there's going to be a new window, a new clock that starts on with that money. And this is a great tool and great way to actually pass on money without having to have the trick that the government plays with trying to raise taxes by raising how much money we need to take out of the accounts and how the tax brackets that are associated with it. So great tools, great tricks for you to make sure that you can have yourself taken care of, your family taken care of, and pay the least amount of tax possible.